Welcome to Girl Choose Yourself, where we're trading self-doubt for self-trust and settling for soaring. I'm your host, Emer Zone, and together here we're building the confidence to create lives so deliciously bold that they scare us a little. In the best possible way, of course, because life's too damn precious and too short to stay cozy in our comfort zones. It is time to choose ourselves for life so damn fabulous and soulfully fulfilling that we have to keep pinching ourselves to check if we're dreaming. Let's do this. Today, my guest is the wonderful Emma Green, who is known worldwide as the tennis elbow queen, a title she boldly claimed after 30 years in practice as a physical therapist. When the pandemic struck and forced her to reimagine her entire practice, Emma transformed her expertise into a global movement, helping thousands of people in over 47 countries through her innovative telehealth approach, best-selling books, and a vibrant online community. Her story is such a powerful reminder that sometimes our biggest challenges, what seems like an obstacle, can lead to our most meaningful transformations. Let's dive in. Emma, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Ema. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. Listen, you and I have known each other for quite a number of years, and we're both European girls living in the US. You're from the UK originally, and I'm from Ireland. And culturally, they're quite different places where we grew up to where we live. So I'm really interested in your perspective on what it took for you to claim this space of being the tennis elbow queen.
Yeah, definitely. You're right. Just for that first part, the US and the UK, even though we think they're so similar, UK, Ireland, US, we think they're so similar because we speak the same language. We culturally, we think we're very similar, and in a lot of ways, we really are. But then there are certain differences. And certainly when I moved to the US almost 20 years ago now, I didn't realize how different mindset was going to be. And it's something that I really noticed quite early on. And even now, I still see that difference. So certainly in the UK, there can be quite a mindset of sort of people need to look after me. The government needs to look after me. Everything is somebody else's fault. It's all a bit doom and gloom. Whether that's because of the weather as well, I don't know. Maybe it is. But then coming over to the US and seeing this, well, I'm going to take care of myself, and this can-do attitude and this very much more optimistic attitude that I think people have over here. And this is a sweeping generalization. I mean, it really is. But it was very, very noticeable to me when I first came over to see that difference. And it still exists. It definitely still exists. And I don't know whether that goes along with being an entrepreneur. And as an entrepreneur, I've come to realize that we are the weirdos. We are the ones that don't fit in. We are the ones that travel the world. I have a small group mastermind for other physical therapists, and every single one of us in that group has moved at some point in our lives to the other side of the world.
Wow.
And it's just so interesting to see that within entrepreneurs, there is this spirit, this can-do attitude, and this, I'm going to go and try it. I'm going to test this out. I'm going to sort of, in the face of fear, I'm going to go and do this. I'm going to try it, and I'm going to see what happens.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see that sort of similarity. And then as a physical therapist, predominantly treating tennis elbow patients, it was probably about 10 years ago now. In fact, not even, maybe 7 years ago. About 7 years ago, somebody called me the tennis elbow queen.
Yeah.
Now, I've been a physical therapist for 30 years. I've been treating tennis elbow patients for 15. So, there was a lot of history before this. But about 7 years ago, somebody called me the tennis elbow queen. And I went, oh, I like that. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. And at the time, and even still now, the bulk of my caseload is tennis elbow patients. I see a lot of tennis elbow patients. It's allowed me to dive really deeply into that particular pathology and to really uncover and research how best to help that specific population. And so when somebody sort of called me that name, I was like, I am claiming that because yes, yeah. I am. That's exactly what I do. And it became my brand and it still is my brand. And it's really interesting because every now and again, I'll work with somebody who is in marketing or they're in online advertising or something like that. And they say, oh, tennis elbow, Emma Green, tennis elbow queen. Oh, the way that it rhymes. And I mean, of course, that was just totally random.
Yeah.
It just happened that way. But, it really helped because then people do remember my name. Oh, Emma Green, tennis elbow queen. And it really has helped me to build my brand and just to, put that crown on my head and go, yes, this is me. This is my space. This is what I do. And these are the people that I help.
I love that. And if anyone looks up Emma online and looks on Amazon, you'll see the tennis elbow queen. And there are many photographs of you actually wearing the crown. And it can be, it's just, I love it. Obviously, I love it because I'm all about people, women in particular, taking up more space in the world, choosing themselves and just saying yes to themselves. But it's very triggering for other people. And particularly if you come from a culture or just even a family environment where you grew up in, where you weren't really encouraged to go for it. There's a lot of, who does she think she is? Ooh, the queen, that it takes a lot. So I think when we're taking up space in that way and you're doing it so boldly, it can it can be triggering for other people for whom just the idea of claiming that amount of space seems very scary. So you can get a little bit of, pushback. And I know we've spoken about this, before, that online you can get, once you start taking up space and being confident in who you serve in your case and what you're going to bring and the value of what you do, other people, you're going to get some people who are haters or are not very supportive. And I think that's something that we have to sort of acknowledge that is out there, that you have to build your own resilience for that, to be able to say yes to yourself, like, really listening to your intuition, like Emma Green, tennis elbow queen. Yeah, it's like almost magical, meant to be, isn't it? And that's exactly what you do. But take us back to the story of coming to where you are today, because you did, things are going so phenomenally well for you right now, and you're serving so many people in person, online, in so many different ways. But take us back to, many years ago when you were on the brink of burnout, basically, and ended up in an emergency room. Tell us what led to that and take us on that journey, because it's pretty incredible.
Yeah. So that, if we go back 5 years, so 2019, I was working part-time in a hospital outpatient physical therapy clinic. If you've ever had physical therapy at the hospital, that's exactly what it was, just a typical clinic. I'd been there for 11 years, very happy there, loved my job. Obviously, I love my profession. I love what I do. Love the people that I work with, best boss ever. There was really nothing wrong with it at all.
Yeah.
But something was not right. So I was part-time in the hospital clinic and I had my own business. And again, going back to that entrepreneurial spirit, pretty much as soon as I graduated from physical therapy clinic 30 years ago, I had a part-time sports injury clinic that I worked at. And I always had my own side hustle.
Yeah.
So I was working in the hospital, had my own clinic, which I built up. It was going really well. I had staff, I had other therapists there. I had aides there. I had admin staff. It was kind of running, ticking along, but there was something not right. And I couldn't figure out what it was. I wasn't happy. I would leave the house every morning at 6 a.m. and I would put the key into the lock and go, I hate this.
Wow.
And it wasn't my job that I hated, because it didn't. It wasn't the people that I worked with. It wasn't, and I just couldn't. And I kind of really struggled to figure out what that was. It's like, well, why are you not happy? You live in California, you're doing all these things. What? And it was the fact that I had to leave the house every morning at 6 a.m. My kids were still sleeping. And I had to leave, and I had to go, and I had to be somewhere. And if one of my kids was getting an award at school, so often they would tell you on a Friday, it's on the Monday. And I would have to ask for that time off. And, maybe I couldn't have the time off because I already had patients booked in. I just felt that I was quite constrained and constricted. And I would go from my hospital job over to my clinic. I literally would swing by a supermarket, pick up a banana for my lunch, as I walked from one place to the next. Worked at the clinic, picked my kids up at 6 p.m. every night, dinner, bath and bed, do it all again. And I was on this treadmill, and I felt like I couldn't get off. And I knew something had to change. I was at the point where I was going and hiding in the occupational therapist room at the back of the clinic, because I was like, I just need space. I was like on the verge of tears. And, as a Brit, stiff upper lip, that wasn't me. And I was like, what is going on? This is so, so weird. So I knew something had to change. So I thought, well, I either give up my clinic and just do my hospital job, or I give up the hospital job and I go full-time into the clinic. And I knew I didn't want to give up my clinic. So I made what I consider to be the hardest decision I've ever made. And I left my hospital job. I'd been a hospital therapist for 25 years. That was my comfort zone. It was my safe space. All the craziness that was going on at home, I would come to work and just go, I'm going to treat patients. That's all I'm going to do. Brilliant. And go home, or go to my other job, and then blah, blah, blah. So I had to leave that job. And it was the hardest thing I've ever done. And as you rightly said, I've moved halfway around the world whilst I was 7 months pregnant. That was easier than leaving my hospital job. And so I left my hospital job. I was very upset to leave. It was working with fantastic people, and I'm still in touch with them all. Obviously, they've not gone anywhere. We're still good friends. But I had to stop being that person in order to become the person that I needed to be.
Wow. That's huge. That's really huge. It's leaving the security, but also that identity and who you become when you make such a big shift.
Yeah. Yeah. So I made that decision, as hard as it was. And I left on Halloween. So October the 31st, 2019, I left the hospital. And that weekend, the following weekend, so about 10 days later, I was supposed to be at a conference. I was going to a business conference by myself in Orlando. And I was so excited about this. It was going to a mastermind with people that I'd been with for 2 or 3 years, so knew them very well. And I was super excited about going to this conference by myself, because up until that point, I would always take my kids. And I would always have, everybody would go everywhere. And so, I'd leave the conference and then go have dinner with my kids. And this was going to be the first time I was going by myself.
Wow. As a mom, I'm sure lots of people listening and going, you were going somewhere. We love our kids, but you're going somewhere by yourself, for yourself. It's pretty precious and special.
It's huge. It's huge. And so I was super excited about this. And then I was in the clinic, because then I'm now full-time in the clinic. So for that sort of 10 days, I started going, the day after I left the hospital, I went into the clinic and I was like, here we are. And there was, again, just something not quite right. And I was like, oh my goodness, what have I done? And I started to have this doubt. I was like, did I make the right decision? Should I have gone the other way? I don't really know. But it's like, okay, I've done it now. Let's do this. But then I started to feel unwell. And I woke up in the middle of the night with what I thought was stomach flu. And it just got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And I got to the point where I was like, okay, I literally, I mean, I was throwing up every half an hour, like on the dot. I couldn't function. So I ended up going to the urgent care, and they gave me a shot, something, sorted me out. I'm like, yeah, oh, I'm good. Thank you. I'm fine. They were like, follow up with your primary care. I'm like, yeah, okay. The next night started again. And it was just worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And I got to the point where I was like, I cannot wait for urgent care to open. Take me to the ER.
Wow.
So my husband, like, bundled the kids into the car, got me to the ER, got me in there. And he was then like taking kids to school, and they gave me I was like, just give me the shot again so that I feel better. So they did, and I felt good. And I was like, okay, I'm ready. I'm good. I can go. And they were like, hang on, we've done your bloods, and there's something going on with your heart. And so they said, you're not leaving. We're going to admit you. We need to check this out, because this could be a heart attack. And I was like, wait, what? Mm-hmm. And at this point, I felt fine. And I was like waiting for my husband to come and get me. And then they were like, no, you're not going anywhere. So instead of going to Orlando for the weekend, I was admitted to the hospital that I had just left for the weekend.
Oh, yeah. It's not funny, but I'm just kind of going, bloody hell, Emma.
Yeah. So they did every test under the sun that they could do. Everything came back normal. So I was kind of like, this is burnout. And I never thought I would experience this. I was a physical therapist of 30 years. It's like new grads that get burnout, when they start working and their caseload increases. It's new grads that get burnout. And I've done this for 30 years. I'm good. But what really put me onto it was 2 months earlier, I'd gone to a conference with another Brit, actually. And so we'd driven to the conference together. And she had told me her story of burnout. And I kind of looked at her, a successful woman, had written a book, had a successful business, all kind of very, that's it. Like, okay, I get you. We're very similar. And she told me her story of burnout. And I kind of looked at her and I was like, you're not the sort of person that I would ever have thought would succumb to burnout. And she told me her story, and it was because I'd heard her story just 2 months before. I was like, oh my goodness, I'm now going through this as well.
Wow. Isn't it even, it's interesting as well, just as you were saying that, and you use the word succumb to burnout. I didn't think she was the type of person who would succumb to burnout. I think that's really common, because we think, I'm doing all the right things and I can do it. And as women, particularly, just take on more and I should be able to cope. And this is normal. We normalize things at a level of stress and a level of kind of busyness, and that isn't sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And so having heard her story, having got all of these tests back that were normal, thank goodness, and kind of putting two and two together, and realizing, I'd not been happy for so long, and this was building up, and then here was basically my body's way of saying, stop, you're not doing this right now. And so at the time I read Jen Sincero, You're a Badass.
Yeah.
And I'd read it before, but I read it again. And she talks about the ego as the little prince. And my little prince did not want me to leave my comfort zone, my safe space, which was being at the hospital. And I think, put me back in there. It's like, that's where you belong. Get back in the hospital. And so I was there for 3 days.
Wow. It's interesting. Our bodies are just, well, you're a physical therapist. Our bodies are always sending us signals, aren't they? And they're so powerful. And if you keep ignoring, something, your body's going to say hello and send you quite a strong, strong signal. It's weird. It's the way you say it as well. nothing was wrong, but something wasn't right. He said that a couple of times. Something wasn't right.
Mhm.
And when you're making such a big change, when you're leaving the security and the comfort of what you've always known in the hospital, and then you move out on your own and you make this big choice. I think your story really demonstrates in quite a dramatic way that it's not just this, oh, and then I went out on my own and I just felt that this was the time. And there was like fabulous music and I was living my dream. Like it's hard, like it is. And there's doubt and there's challenge. And, and it doesn't mean that it's the wrong decision. Tell me how you know that it was the right decision, even in spite of, ending up in the doctor's, in the ER for 3 days, tests on your heart, burnout, and all of that. And you still go and say, that's the right direction. What made that clear for you, despite this big sort of scare medically?
Yeah, I think really sort of, the timing of it all of that went down in November of 2019. So then, I obviously had a little bit of time off under doctor's orders, got back into the clinic, got everything back on track. We had our best month ever in January of 2020. And so I was like, okay, this is good. This is where we can be. And at the end of 2020, my physical therapist gave me her notice, and my landlady gave me notice as well. She was like, you need to be out. And I'd been there for 8 years. We had a great relationship. And I was like, I have patients booked, throughout February. I mean, is there any chance I can just, stay through February? And she's like, no, you need to be gone at the end of January. So again, this is very much the entrepreneurial journey. I always see the employee journey is very kind of, yeah, you can get ups and downs, but it's very kind of gentle. And the entrepreneurial journey is this freaking roller coaster.
Yeah.
The ups are incredibly high, but the downs can come crashing down as well.
And it's
And
all
so
on you. It's all on you. It's kind of
that's
like,
it.
this is me, myself, and I'm the one I have to count on me, and I need to resource and get this sorted. So
Yeah,
what did you do? What did
that's
you
it.
do?
So I started the search for a new location, which I was really enjoying actually, because of this local realtor who I got on really well with. We would go out for lunch, we'd go and look at a few different spots, and I found this most amazing space. It was exposed brick walls, it was wood beam ceilings. It was just, I mean, it was beautiful. And I was like, yes, this is the spot. This is where I'm going to grow and expand. And I sat down with one of the business advisors from the small business development center that I was working with at the time. Well, and I still work with her. And I said, I found this space. I absolutely love it. This is going to be amazing. And she said, show me your numbers. And I did. And she went, you can't afford it. And I was like, what? No, don't tell me that. This is beautiful. This is where I want to go. And she said, no, you can't afford it. And so if you just take note of the timing, this was January 2020.
Ooh,
And so
something happened around then, I think.
she saved me from signing that lease. And I found another location, which was going to be, it was actually a new gym that was being built at the time. One of the owners was British. We hit it off like a house on fire. We got on very well. And he was like, you know what? I've got a room. We were going to use it as a storage space, but it's quite big. I think we could have this as a physical therapy room. I was like, amazing. This is going to be fantastic. We were going to move from the original location into that new location. It wasn't ready, so we just moved into an interim space for the short term, which again, we were just sort of there. I mean, almost like week by week. There was no lease signed. I was working with a business coach at the time, and she said, sign something for your new location or you're going to lose it. And I went round there and I said to him, can we get something on paper? And he was like, absolutely, yes. And we sat and chatted, and, we were sort of having a bit of banter. And then a couple of his team came in and there was some issue that he needed to deal with. So we didn't get it done. And he said, you know what, we can revisit this in a couple of days. I was like, okay, fine. Then lockdown happened. And I was out of my lease from the first place. I hadn't signed the lease in the new place. I was on a week to week in the current place. My business advisor had saved me from signing the lease on the place I couldn't afford. And I was like, I could not have been in a better position when lockdown actually happened.
Wow, that's
So
amazing when you think about it, all these fortuitous happenings that just saved you, because so many people got in so much trouble at the beginning of COVID who were
mm,
locked in to very disadvantageous arrangements and were just spending money on premises that they could not use and were just
yeah,
draining the bank account.
mhm, yeah. And that totally would have been me had the landlady not asked us to leave.
Yeah.
I would very, I'd been with her for 8 years. I would very much have felt like I got to keep paying my rent. I got to help her out, and I would have done that, and it probably would have put my business under.
And nobody knew
So
how long it was going to last either. When it was beginning, we all thought this is, a few months on this. Nobody had any idea.
yeah, yeah, that's it exactly. And even in May of that year, so that would then have been a couple of months into lockdown. I had a call with a business advisor that I was working with at the time, and I said to him, this the transient, the temporary location actually wants us to stay. The new location wants us to go there. I have nothing in writing with either of them yet, but I think this could be really good. I can end up with two locations here. I think it's what I should do. And I can vividly remember this. He sat back in his chair and he crossed his arms in front of him and he said, "Should you?"
Mm.
And that was a massive pattern interrupter for me, because I was like, should I? And I started to think, should I? Do I want two locations? Do I want two sets of staff? Do I want two sets of financials? Do I want two sets of headaches? Do I want to be running around like a crazy person like I was?
Yeah.
I've now had a couple of months of working at home. What do I want?
Isn't it funny the way you can? I love how you describe it as a pattern interrupter, and this pattern of just going on this, build it bigger, more is better,
Mm,
doing the traditional model, another location, another location, another location. And that is the recipe for success in my business, in my space. And then somebody asking you just those two words, should you? A
mm,
simple kind of pause that stops you and gets you to reflect. And then and then you ask the big question, like, what do I really want? And when you sat with that question, what
mm.
came through for you?
I was like, I love being at home. I love working from home. I love being with my kids. I know it was only 2 months in. I love being with my kids. I love being there to help them. I love not having to be somewhere at a certain time. And
Mm.
of course, going back to me putting the key into the lock, that was the thing. That was the big thing. That was the thing that I did not like. And I thought, wow, here is my opportunity now to rewrite my lifestyle and how I not only work, but live.
Just kind of tingling all over as you say that, Emma, because it is so empowering. It's so like taking it back from everybody else's view and a very externally validated view of what success is and what you should do, what you
Mm-hmm.
should be pursuing, and then kind of coming into your own power, really, and kind of saying, what works for me, like for me, and then taking on this choice that what will I choose for myself? And it's a real profound self-trust. I
Mm.
will build something that reflects what works for me. And how has that journey been?
Amazing. I mean, my goodness, if I just look at the last 5 years, it has been, I mean, absolutely transformational. So I'd already started working a little bit of telehealth pre-pandemic, because being so specialized in what I do, I would have people further and further away geographically reaching out to me. And so I'd started to dabble in telehealth. So actually, when lockdown did happen, we shifted all of our patients from in person in the clinic to telehealth straight away. And that was seamless. I added in a daily fitness class because some of our clients would come to the clinic for the social aspect as much as the therapeutic aspect. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want anybody to feel alone. There were many of my clients who lived alone, who were maybe older. And I wanted to make sure we were tapping into them. So we actually added services at the start of lockdown. We added in a daily fitness class. I was already doing Pilates mat classes, so we just shifted those online as well. They are still now going, sort of 4.5, nearly 5 years later, they're still ongoing. And I started to look at, well, you know what? I've got 10 hours a week back because I'm not doing the school run now. So that morning school run, that afternoon school run, 10 hours of my week back. What am I going to do with that? Well, I wrote my book. And so
Your first book.
My first book. And so I had probably been writing it for the previous 5 years, like a chapter here, a chapter there, and then nothing would happen with it. So I used that time and I wrote my book. And it was a way of getting my information out into the world. I created an online course. People further and further away were starting to ask me. And the reason that happened was because I had created a Facebook group for the tennis elbow sufferers that I was working with so that they could socialize and interact with other people in a similar situation so they didn't feel like they were going through this thing alone. And so, of course, I created this Facebook group for my patients, but other people started to find it. So obviously, anybody, wherever they are in the world, can now find this Facebook group that helps tennis elbow sufferers. So I don't know. I honestly don't know how many countries we're in. I mean, it's every continent except Antarctica. I know that for sure. But I now have nearly 4,000 people in this Facebook group, and so they were saying, "Well, how can I need your help? How can you help me?" And so I created the online course. I basically, instead of saying the words to a patient like I normally would, and after doing this for sort of 10 years by that time, it's almost a little bit of a script. Everybody needs the same kind of thing. And so instead of saying those words to a patient, I said it into a camera. And I created my online course that people could then access. Well, then some people were saying they couldn't afford the course. So that's when the book was born. So the book went out there. There's the Kindle edition at less than $10. So to make it as accessible as possible to people. And then the YouTube channel came from that. And it just started to snowball. And so now I have several courses. I've got small courses for people who haven't had tennis elbow for very long or golfer's elbow for very long. I have a comprehensive elbow pain course for people who have had it for longer. Maybe there's a number of things going on. I include group coaching with that. We can do individual coaching if somebody prefers that. Still got the Facebook group going. So it just really snowballed. And I think I started to realize that this whole new world, this online, this digital world of giving people information, that's exactly what we do as physical therapists. We're educators, essentially. The education side of it is the biggest part of what we do. And I started to realize, well, this is something that I can utilize to help get my information out there and reach more people.
And it was, obviously COVID and the pandemic and the lockdown sort of was pushing you in that direction. It forced many people, but I really see you as a trailblazer in this area because you were stepping in, hungry to learn. Not so many people would just have offered their services via Zoom sessions when their offices were shut. And as soon as offices opened back up, they, went back into the in-person. But you just took on the digital space. And I think it's really important for people who are listening to realize what this journey is like as an entrepreneur. Like, Emma, you didn't know where you were ending up. You were like taking the next obvious step on a pathway as it emerged, as you were hearing back from the people you were serving about what more they needed. And you're like, oh, okay, I'll do that. And oh, I'll add that. And people need community. And people need community like you provide, not just during a pandemic, but, loneliness is like at epidemic proportions in the world. The idea of a community where people can come, where they have a shared need and also shared interest, is so powerful, and all these pieces have sort of come together, and you have put yourself into the space of that digital world and kind of made yourself, I think, a leader in this area in telehealth, because you are just, how can I serve? What more can I do? Always listening to the people who you're serving and saying, what's next? So as you kind of look ahead, and if you're thinking about, say, your own business and, where you can take it as an entrepreneur, what does that look like for you? Or are you just kind of taking it sort of month by month, year by year, and opening up to whatever presents itself?
Yeah, it's so interesting to see how this evolves as you go along. If I think about this year I restarted my podcast, or kind of created a slightly new podcast. And it's very much on the lines of, yes, helping tennis elbow sufferers, but a lot of what I teach can be quite generic. It can be applied to whether you've got back pain or knee pain or neck pain or foot pain or whatever. So those generic aspects are sort of really what I'm bringing to the fore. I'm speaking with other experts who are experts in what they do. So I've had a gentleman who is an expert in thoracic outlet syndrome. So I spoke with him, and another one who's an expert in chronic pain, and then there's sciatica, and different. So essentially, kind of people like me who are doing things in the online space in their own particular area. And sort of bringing these people together so that people can access their information and learn about them. Well, then that's now morphing into more of wellness and looking at wellness. So the people who've been with me in fitness classes and Pilates classes over the past 4 or 5 years, we're now looking at each month next year, we're going to take a different topic and we're going to explore that. So in January, we're going to be setting our health and wellness goals. We're going to be looking at specific biomarkers that we can track through the year. In February, we're looking at heart health and adding a cardio component. And again, how we can track that, how we can keep each other accountable. In March, we're starting to look at nutrition, and we'll also add some core components. So we're looking at different elements as we go throughout the year so that we can basically live long, happy, healthy, vibrant lives. There's so much in the research that we're learning about health, wellness, and longevity, and how we can incorporate some of these super simple strategies into our daily lives and benefit from that and just feel amazing as we're doing it.
I love that. I love that, taking in the the power yourself for what you can influence and how you can look after yourself, and taking it as a really holistic approach, from, you know, such a medicalized sort of approach is often taken. And I know that you're so interested in, seeing the whole person. You're an absolute expert in your field on tennis elbow, and you're incredibly curious and interested in the whole person and how, and you have to be, because we are, whole organisms. So I find that fascinating. Tell people, Emma, because that sounds amazing. As for the new year, I know this episode will go out in the new year, but people can join, I'm assuming, at any time during the year. It's always an amazing time to get serious about your wellness journey and your health and your well-being. So tell people where they can find out about all these amazing offerings, and they can start living an incredibly, healthy life where they're prioritizing their well-being on all levels.
Yeah, for sure. So you can go to my website. It's tenniselbowqueen.com, and /optimize will get you to the health and wellness membership that we're starting in 2025. And yes, you can join at any time. You can contact me through the website as well, and you can find me on socials. Literally, if you search up Tennis Elbow Queen, you'll find me.
Yes, you will. She is everywhere in all the best ways. I want to just kind of ask you a final question for anyone who's listening and they are going to be inspired by the journey that you've been on and what you have created and continue to create for yourself and for the people that you serve. If there's a listener who's been listening to your story and they're kind of stuck in a job that's unfulfilling and they're worried about kind of burnout and kind of looking after themselves, what advice would you give to them?
I think that the number one thing is to really look deeply inside and think, what is it that you want? What is it that you want to do? Not what you think you should be doing or what others are telling you you should be doing, but how do you want to live your life? How do you want to wake up? What do you want to see? How do you want to feel as you're going through the day? And that's what you've got to figure out first.
Emma, that vibe is just so powerful. Wonderful. Love talking to you all the time. Thank you so much for your time today. This has been amazing. Thanks, Emma. Thank you so much for choosing to spend this time with me today. If you enjoy the episode and it resonated with you, please consider subscribing and share this podcast with someone you know who would benefit from the message. If you'd like to take things a step further, you'll find some free and paid resources in the show notes. And until next time, in the unlikely event that no one has told you this yet today, let me have the profound honor of reminding you that you are truly magnificent and the world is a far better and brighter place because you are here with us all. See you next time.